even in Nazi Germany, that Jews were more assimilated in Germany than in any other European country before the Great Holocaust. But in Sri Lanka, you actually have a culture, we call it a culture of genocide that's been created. It's not an aberration. Genocide is what Sri Lanka has been about from the outset. It's just a matter of how much restraint was lifted once the British went, and how bold they thought they could be, given the indifference of the international community. And this culture of genocide we describe is composed largely of the convergence of three ingredients. One, the myths of the Mahavamsa that teach the Sinhalese Buddhists that this is just a Sinhalese Buddhist island. Buddha came here, said that no one else belongs here, and the kings were celebrated for slaughtering all of the Tamils. In fact, these famous kings are told, don't worry about all the slaughter. Your conscience should be salved because after all, you're fighting for Buddha. And that is then combined with the teachings and writings of Dharmapala, he being sort of the prophet of the Sinhalese Buddhists writing around the 1900s, and teaching again the celebration of the purity of the Aryan race. That's the same words he was using at the time of what? The Aryan race of Adolf Hitler. Some of his writings sort of echo Mein Kampf, if you will, in the idea of racial supremacy being the signature of Sri Lanka. And Dharmapala is treated as, like the Christians treat Jesus, or the Jews treat Moses, or the Muslims treat Muhammad, they, Buddhists in Sinhalese, treat Dharmapala as their prophet. And then the third element is the continuing legacy of the Mahavamsa and Dharmapala teachings through the current school of Buddhist monks. When you attend a temple there, it's a classroom, an instruction in genocide. And the monks teach the imperative of keeping the island Sinhalese Buddhist pure. And any non-Sinhalese Buddhist is viewed as an interloper, an alien creature with no more rights than an animal. And you have the very odd situation that during periods of the CFA, ceasefire agreement from 2002 to 2008, you would have Buddhist monks leading protests against the peace. Think of that. The Buddhist monks protesting the peace. Get out there and fight, kill. And so it's this culture of genocide that makes the Sri Lankan situation unique, because the genocide really is incorporated into part of the daily life of all the Sinhalese Buddhists. It's not just the government. And if you look at the trajectory of the politics in Sri Lanka since '48, you'll see that the politicians who on occasion wanted to yield a little, perhaps offering Tamil equal official status in Tamil-dominated areas, or discussing autonomy, they got killed, assassinated. And once the first prime minister was assassinated, his successors, once they saw the protests, just backed down. So they wouldn't implement any of the so-called concessions. Nothing was ever implemented with regard to the autonomy pledges, with regard to official language, with regard to treating Tamils equally. Because the political culture rewards the leaders who succumb to the most base instinct. And that's because, and if we want to know why is the political culture that way, again, it goes back. From day one, the Sinhalese Buddhists absorbed the Mahavamsa, Dharmapala, carried on through the teachings of the Buddhist monks. And it's there every single day, and you'll find where are the Sinhalese Buddhists protesting what happened. It's ongoing in Sri Lanka. I grew up in a similar situation in the United States in the civil rights movement involving blacks in the South. And even at the worst days of Jim Crow, and I was there, the freedom fight, the freedom riders, and Mississippi Burning, if you've seen that film. There were whites as well as blacks who stood up and said, this is bad. And I saw whites get their heads beat in, and I was threatened, as well as blacks. Some, at least core, element of decency retained. So that showed that the culture wasn't completely corrupted by this idea of supremacy. But in Sri Lanka, nothing. Where do you see the protest against the Tamils? Nowhere. Pure silence. So taking this idea of a genocide culture, we're able to chronicle then genocide almost like Chinese water torture. There weren't any particular single incidents in the genocide period that applied to Fonseca and Gadabay in their current positions, namely post-2005. Unlike, say, 1983, where you had 3,000 or 4,000 massacred by government-orchestrated riots and tens of thousands of homes and businesses destroyed, 500,000 displaced persons. But there was no one single incident. It's more like genocide on the installment plan. But in some sense, genocide on the installment plan is more convincing than other kinds of genocide because it shows the motivation. It's there every single day. And what we've done here in this major model indictment, we have chronicled every day since November of 2005 up to the present, there's been at least 1 to 3 disappearances or killings, extrajudicial killings. And they all have the same signature. The disappearances, the white van, no license plate, pluck somebody off the sidewalk, you never see them again. And they don't even make any attempt to disguise. It's not even clever to try to vary the method by which this is done. And the extrajudicial killings have some variations. Typically it's gunman show, and they target males 20 to 34 years old because they feel they are the people who would be the greatest danger in the event of a conflict. Sometimes they rape before they commit the murder. Oftentimes they will target people by their national identity cards, and you'll apply to be able to travel to Colombo, and then you're on their hit list and you just disappear. But there are 1 to 2 of these all of the time. And who is responsible? Well, in most of the cases, these are so-called unidentified gunmen. But where do they operate? In the Tamil areas, there are 189 military camps. 189, a staggering number. You can't walk 50 yards without having a checkpoint. No one wiggles their finger there without the knowledge of the military or the secret security police or the police themselves. And so it's incomprehensible that someone could get a gun and be watched by the government, army, and security forces if there wasn't collaboration. We know that's going. It's the same collaboration that we've witnessed between the government and Karuna and the government in Piliam. They control everything. They have the national identity cards. And that's why it's readily plausible to ascribe all of these killings to the government, directly or indirectly. They're controlling what's going on there. Now, of course, since we're proving genocide, we were scrupulous in this chronicle to avoid counting anyone who was killed or maimed as a result of the hostilities between the government and the Tamil Tigers. As a matter of genocide law, they are irrelevant because the motivation is not the genocidal motivation when you're slaughtering civilians for no reason at all, other than that they're Tamil. A lot of bad things happen in the war, but it's not genocide. When you die in war, it can be illegal under other statutes, it's still not genocide. So none of the numbers that we compiled here at all are numbers that relate to someone who died fighting with the Tamils, were involved in crossfire because they're in the battlefield or anything like that. So we were careful to make certain that our evidence was undeflected by issues of terrorism, things of that sort.